Well, as I suggested, I wasn't going to show you the entire strip down of the cylinder head. It was a little bit easier to do with it in the frame, because at least the frame would hold the engine still while I undid the head bolts. As I suggested earlier, there's obviously a good clearance there between the cylinder head and the frame. That cylinder head is resting on top of the studs, so it shows there's enough lift room. Even with these cables here and pipelines in the way, there's still plenty of clearance. And just to demonstrate how easily that comes out. And remove the old gasket, which is always a bloody tricky job because it's so flexible, it's hard to get it to come up in a straight line. Come on. In a way it makes you feel like wanting to destroy the damn thing just to get it out. There we go. The head gasket off. Some minor evidence of alloy corrosion there, which made me wonder if in this old engine whether the right coolant was being used. Lots of white alloy. Decoking the engine. Decoking was something that used to happen an awful lot in the early days of internal combustion engines. It was something caused by the types of oil and fuel mixture, the low tolerances, various things causing carbon build-up within the engine. Modern engines run a lot tighter tolerances, and the fuel's not as carbon contaminating, the engines burn more efficiently, which kind of begs the question, how come we've got so much carbon build-up in this engine? Well, the fact that this engine was originally a carburetted engine leads me to believe that perhaps the setup wasn't quite as it should have been, and maybe this engine was burning a bit richer than it should have. The richer the engine, the more fuel it deposits within the combustion chamber, the more carbon it will leave behind. My intention originally was to start taking this off with a wire wheel. Now, I believed initially that this was copper wire, because steel wire will tend to scratch the aluminium, and the piston heads, although they're hardened, they are aluminium, and the sleeves as well are aluminium, and I don't want to leave scratch marks anywhere on the mating faces of the cylinder head. And when I look closely at this, I could see that these are actually steel wires, coated steel wires, not the copper wire I was hoping for. So that was out. I then have thought about going over it with a flat wheel, and I've got various old flat wheels, but this is the finest flat wheel I've got, and unfortunately it's still a little on the coarse side. Now, I did think about using the flat wheel for the inside here just to take that carbon off the top edge, but I do have an old copper brush where the bristles have got rather short, but I think they'll just be about ideal just to rub off the carbon on the piston heads and maybe take the carbon off the top edge. Now, the copper is not a strong wire, it's not going to cut into the steel liner, and these are very slender steel liners. I think, maybe, I might be wrong on that. They might be a hardened surface. But yeah, that seems to be working very well actually. And again, I can just use it just to get the carbon off the crown of the piston. Another thing I did consider before starting this was about the engine, the carbon debris ending up down the chain tunnel. So I put a cloth in there to try and prevent as much of that as possible. Obviously it won't stop it all, but it'll stop some. There's also the coolant sleeves here, Yeah, the carbon's going to get down into the coolant sleeves, so that will need a flush. It's the only way I'm going to get it out of there, and there's very little way I'm going to prevent it from getting in. And finally, carbon will get caught between the piston and the sleeve, and actually that's not such a problem since it was there in the first place anyway. It's just going to get blown through. Once the engine starts, the carbon will just get blown out the exhaust. Right, clearly this is going to take a long time to do. I'm not going to film it all. I'm just going to take off the carbon lip off the inside of the liner, clear all the carbon off the top of the pistons. It's just time. Nothing more than that. It just takes time to do. Okay, I'll bring you back once I've cleaned it all up. Having cleaned up the pistons, alright, they're not exactly immaculate, but at least they're better than they were. And we've cleaned the mating face. I now have to find something to hold the cam chain up with, because the next job is to put on the cylinder head gasket. Replacement cylinder head gasket with a left and a right marking on it, which I presume also dictates right side up. So we'll sit it on top of the studs first of all. Feed the cam chain through it, then try and line up with the studs, I hope. And that's it, it's on. Spanner back through the cam chain to hold the cam chain. And yes, you seem to have the head gasket in place. Now the head gasket goes on dry. It's a compression type gasket, which basically means that as the cylinder head is tightened down, the compression seals the gasket. The next thing is the cylinder head. Once the cylinder head goes on and is tightened down, anything I've done wrong at this point, too late to change it. Once that cylinder head is tightened down, the only way you change it is to take the whole thing back off, which means a replacement gasket. So now's the time to check. One of the things that concerns me is we have these little, what looks like locating pinholes to me, yet neither cylinder head seems to have those, and I can't see them on the cylinders themselves either. Right, turns out there's two dowels, locating dowels into the cylinder head. I'm not going to bother taking those out of there. I'll just leave them there and they can help locate the head. This head is a little bit carbonized. I'm not going to bother cleaning that up too much, to be honest. I just want to take the carbon from around the edges here so that it doesn't inhibit the mating surfaces. Yeah. If it doesn't match up exactly with the cylinder, there's a possibility that some of these lumps of carbon could wedge the cylinder head very slightly open, causing a leak. And because this is water jacketed, leaks are a problem. So let's try and get some of this, and it is going to be a problem straight away, I can tell that. I say it's just around the edges, just so that it doesn't. That's tough. I'm going to have to lift those with something else. sharp edge to take that off. Now never ever use a screwdriver to do these. You should always use a proper scraper, because a screwdriver can dig into the soft alloy and will make the problem worse. An indent is every bit as bad as a raised. In fact, in some ways an indent is worse because you can't fill it. There's at least a raised area, you smooth it down. Yes, I'm doing it with a screwdriver. Yes, I absolutely should not be doing this. The carbon can get pretty sung. Anyone who's had to decoke an oven or clean their oven out after they've left it too long will know that carbon gets pretty strong. Fortunately for ovens, you can use cleaning elements, chemical cleaners, that will break down the carbon. I would not recommend that you use it on alloy, because I'm not entirely sure whether the alloy will be attacked by the chemicals. It is possible that it will attack the alloy and destroy it. I am happy with that. This head is ready to go on. Right, I've now got to balance the cylinder head onto the top of the studs, then close the adjuster and the guide together, and then feed the chain up through the centre, so that I can then lower the cylinder head down onto its little guides, and hopefully that will be the cylinder head in place. There is one other thing, of course. I've got to make sure I put the cylinder head on the right way round. As I pick the cylinder head up, all the followers have fallen out of place, and some of them we've got carbon gone in the inside of them, so I've got to now clean them all up and put them back in. Now fortunately, as they've fallen into order, so all the ones on this side belong on the back and all the ones on the other side belong at the front, because of course I've rotated it through 180 degrees along that axis. I'm convinced that these are hydraulic followers, it's not shimmed. Oh, it is shimmed. Oh, they are shimmed. Sorry, there's a loose shim in the middle there. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yes. Don't know if you can see it. It says on it 200. That is a little tiny shim. I'll pop it into the top of the valve stem. Make sure I've got all the carbon off this, it doesn't interfere, and put the cup back on. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Now I've got to feed the wires through the middle here, and hopefully bring the cam chain with it. Yep. Now I should be able to put the spanner through, and that's got the camshaft through. Next thing is to try and push these together a bit so that I can lower this down now, this head down onto the to do that I've got to line up the studs, and at the moment I can't even see where the studs are. Oh! Okay. They seem to be lining up, okay. Gently down. Before I can go any further, I'll bring it back up just a tad. Yes, I've got to line up the gasket. What's stopping the cylinder head from going down completely is in fact these dowels catching on the gaskets. Yeah, so I'm having to pull the gasket up onto the dowel so that it will then slip down into place. There we go, that's it. That's all that was holding it, was the gasket, the studs. And there we go. The cylinder head is on. Now I want to get a little swab and I want to go round all the faces where the nuts and washers are going to go, because as you can see they're a bit contaminated. That one's not too bad, but you can clearly see it on that one. A lot of grit there, so I've got to go round and clean all those up and make sure that they're not going to interfere with the pressure that's applied. When those bolts are torqued down, that carbon could affect the pressure that's applied. So, got to do that next. It's an ordinary screwdriver, a piece of thick cloth wrapped over the tip of it. I'll just dunk it down and hopefully it will pick up all the crap. Okay, it's not quite getting there, although it has picked up some. I'll have to find a better way. Right, ordinary brush. Oh, that works much better, much better. Oh yes, much cleaner. Right, really tricky getting the angle on this. I've had to put the camera in a really funny position, but however, just clean up the faces of the bolts. Same reason again, make sure the threads are clear of any grit, and here we go. And get them into place. I've got to be really careful of these ones, make sure I don't drop anything down the well, but I don't want to put a cloth in there because it'll actually interfere with me trying to get the washers on. Right, using the magnet, same way I sort of got them out, so I can control them going on. And again, these are quite, there's lots of open spaces around these, so I need to control those as well, just to make sure that they don't end up, as I say, down the chain well. Next of course is to get the nuts on, and this time I'm going to put the nut into a socket, then magnetise the socket, and oh no, it's fallen straight down the well. Oh no. See it, but I can't get it. Get off! The bloody chain now. Oh no! No! I've lost the bloody thing. Damn it! Oh, damn it! Oh, sod. Right, there it is. The little nut. Bugger. Now I've got to try and get it with a magnet. Oh. Okay, so the obvious answer to that is try it first. Now this time I put the magnet right the way through directly onto the nut itself. I thought that by magnetising the socket it would grip the nut, but it didn't. Oh Christ! Oh, this is not going well. It's worth mentioning that I have, it's worth mentioning that I have cleaned up all the faces on these before starting to put them together. Now obviously these two were the more open, but these two are open as well. Sorry, I can see that better. They're open as well, so nuts can fall down the well. I'll put my finger there as a factor of safety. Give it a few turns. Retrieve the magnet, retrieve the socket, and that's it. Nuts in place. And the last one. Alright, I can feel the thread catching, so bring the magnet up out of the way and bring the socket up out of the way. Oh, wow. And then get the rest on before we start torquing down. Now, specified torque for the head bolts is 45 Newton meters in stages. Now because the rating on this large torque wrench is really quite high, I've set it to about 20 Newton meters, and we'll take it in a diagonal pattern. This is a standard click wrench. There we go, 20. Oh, and we've got to do it in a diagonal pattern. And across. And diagonal again. Then on the diagonal again. Then raise it to 30 Newton meters, and then we take it round again. Once I've got all these up to the specified 45 Newton meters, I then need to do these inner bolts at 25 Newton meters. And once I've done that, that's the head fitted and torqued down. Okay, I shall proceed then to torque the rest of this head down, and then we'll move on to refitting the camshafts and setting the timing. Preparing the camshafts for reassembly, I'm going to loosely put the bolts in to the cam sprocket. Now the cam sprocket, I was wondering, how do I know if it's 180 degrees out? How do you know which way round it should go? At the moment I'm going to use the shadow markings to line up, as I have noticed if I do put it 180 degrees round, the shadow marking isn't quite right. very slightly off. It's not the best way, not a perfect way. I think it's maybe the only way. Now, I'm going to put it on like that and we'll see how we get on. Now I've put some oil on top of the buckets. I've also put some oil into the bearings. So now I should be able to just sit the camshaft on top. I'll also put oil onto the bearings on the camshaft itself and onto the cams. And I've also got to make sure I put it on the right way round. Well, this shouldn't be too difficult, because on this side you've got two bearings close together, plus one. On the far side you've got two bearings far apart. So it's those three centre bearings which will describe which way round the camshaft fits on. You've got 1, 2 bearings to that side, and 1, 2, 3 bearings to this side. So it goes that way round. I can just sit it on there, but first of all I need to get the cam chain over it. Now at the moment I'm not too worried about setting the timing. I just want to get it in place first of all. We can worry about the timing once we've got the other camshaft in place. There we go. One camshaft in place. Now with the second camshaft, or the inlet camshaft, I'm going to have to leave the sprocket floating, because I'll have to get the cam chain across it, get the camshaft into place, and then set it accordingly. The inlet one's a little more difficult because I've also got the trigger mechanism for the fuel injection system, which needs to be bolted on at the same time as the sprocket. Actually, thinking about it, I'd probably have been better putting the inlet one on first, being the trickier of the two. So I shall take the two bolts off that exhaust camshaft, let the sprocket loose, and then I'll put the inlet one on. Spot of engine oil into the lid of the oil can. Smear some across the bearing faces and across the followers. Now the one thing I've had to look out for here, these black bolts as opposed to the silver ones on the other camshaft, are because the bolts are slightly longer to allow for this plate. The plate can only go on one way because it has a location button there. But again, the sprocket, well, I'm not too sure of. Anyway, let's see if we can get this on. That's it roughly in place. Alright, try and get the cam chain over the sprocket, which it's very reluctant to do. There we go. It's on, but of course it's on in the wrong position. I need to move the sprocket around a bit. Oh, come on! And now that one's come off. Ah! It looks and feels as if something's holding the cam chain tensioner forward, almost as if the tension was on it already, which it isn't. There's too much tension across that chain. It should be slack as anything at the moment, and it's not. So let's pull this one out. Try and have a look. Yeah, that feels jammed. It does, that feels jammed. That feels like it's jammed against something. It's not moving back or forwards. Right, on the old engine, you can see that's very free to move. It flops about quite easily. And it rests against the adjuster. It should go right the way back. Over on top, you see it's overhanging the back of the cylinders. And flops forward again quite easily. Our friend here is stuck. Won't move forward, won't move back. And you probably can't see. It's quite difficult to see. But it's not resting against the adjuster. And it is really, really difficult to see down there to see what it is resting against. I cannot for the life of me see what's holding it. What troubles me now is if I can't find out why that's jamming, I'm going to have to take this whole thing apart again to find out what's holding it, what's preventing it. I'll try and use a kind of endoscope, a probing camera, to go down there and try and get a closer look. I'm pretty sure that was slack before the cylinder head went on. It's just going to be an absolute pain if I have to get yet another cylinder head gasket just because of something stupid that I may have missed.